what I saw in the trailer was a mushroom. So perhaps the drug that cures all comes from a mushroom, which would not surprise me since mushrooms have all these wonderful properties that we are still discovering.
Hey, Karl, Happy New Year. How are you?
Good. How are you? Happy New Year, Erum. I know we've both been under the weather. I'm glad we're both getting better.
Yeah, I know I probably sound a little bit more nasally than usual. My whole end of 2024, kind of a bust. I think a lot of people have been sick. I've been trying to reach out to people and I had all these plans to visit all my friends and none of that happened. I pretty much stayed in bed and also took care of my son since my husband had been traveling. But anyway, sorry, I don't want to make this very depressing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the sprint of the last week and a half, 2 weeks before Christmas, which this year fell at an interesting time, meaning that a lot of people took a full 2 weeks off, which is great. But I think the sprint to get there took a lot out of people. I know you and I were grinding to the last minute, but it's been really good to have a little bit of time away from the office. So for this episode of the Grow Everything podcast, we just thought we'd talk about our outlook for 2025. I don't think we have to reflect on 2024, which is a really great year. But what are you seeing? Or should I just kick it off by criticizing some predictions?
Yeah, predictions are predictions, but yeah, tell me what's going on.
A lot of the predictions are things you expect. People are saying more AI, that we might see AGI.
What's AGI?
Sentient, artificial general intelligence. It's where the machine is sentient, agents running amok on the internet and doing our bidding for us and for other people. I mean, these are not really surprising predictions. More robotics. We're going to go to the moon in terms of we're going to be mapping out the moon a lot more. These things are all known. So those are what I read. And I had to go and look at some biotech predictions to see what people are saying. And I found that Deloitte did some predictions, but I thought they were super saccharine and nothing really surprising. Deloitte predicts that digital transformation is going to continue to drive growth. And it's funny because...
What is it, 1999?
Yeah, exactly. It would have at least been a little bit more accurate to say something like AI drug discovery is going to drive growth, or even say the first AI discovered drug will hit the market. But they didn't even go that far. So sorry, Deloitte, your predictions suck. But we have seen a little bit of a thawing of biotech winter. We are expecting to see a lot of M&A activity. There's a lot of companies that are hurting, that are ready to be acquired. And we're potentially on the cusp of another pandemic. I hope not. But bird flu has been in the news. 1 million birds were reported infected. As of this recording, which is the last day of the year of 2024, 1 million birds found infected in Ohio. There's been cows that have been reported infected. Humans are being infected with this new bird flu. I just hope that this doesn't turn into another COVID, because this bird flu is way worse than COVID ever was. And I'm not seeing the 5-alarm fire that we should be seeing for this.
Wait, what? This is crazy. I mean, I've been in a hole for the past few days just because I've been sick.
Yeah.
So I can't be sick with another flu. I feel like the past few years has been one respiratory disease after another for me. I have a toddler, but ever since he was in daycare, which he was going daycare since he was really young, he's been coming back with something and it's been transferring to us. I can't do another flu. So, and the crazy thing is when we went to Synbio Beta last year, Paul Stamets was talking about how the bird flu will transfer to humans and then what?
Right.
He's talking about this last year and here we are. And so I hope it's all contained. I hope it's not spreading in humans or other animals too. But in humans, we're very dirty people that go all over the place. We're not washing our hands. We have complete disregard. And that's not even disregard, right? You don't know that you're truly sick until it's too late. You might have interacted with so many people. That was the nature of the sickness that I had. I went to go see my sister and I wasn't sick when I went there, but then I got sick when I was there and then she got sick, then her sons got sick. It was pretty bad. But anyway, oh my gosh, I hope that we keep the bird flu in check or that we have a vaccine that can spin up very quickly.
Both would be the ideal. We might need all hands on deck for this if it does end up becoming a full-blown pandemic. But let's talk about other things and be more hopeful. During 2024 and even before in 2023, we covered a lot of the topics that we're going to talk about today in this outlook for 2025. And one of them is DeSci, this idea of decentralized science, people using blockchain-based tokens to pay for science. And one token that I am following, I am not an investor in, is a token called Spore, which is using a genetic algorithm to improve itself over and over again to become the ultimate cryptocurrency. And when it was first developed, and I might get the story wrong, so listeners, if you hear this and I'm wrong, just correct me. What I understand is at the very beginning, they were giving some tokens out to researchers. I don't know much of the details on that. It was a story on X. But I do think that we're going to see a lot more of these kind of DeSci tokens pop up for rare diseases. We know that the guys from Hair Down moved into a lab here in New York City. And it's very exciting. It's another way to fund scientific research. And science funding is something that is near and dear to our heart. So the more funding there is, the better.
Yeah, I mean, and there's been a lot of funding we've been talking about in 2024 with the Department of Defense funding a lot of biomanufacturing efforts. In 2025, we should expect the new administration to continue funding programs. One that we definitely want to point out is the ARPA-H program, which ARPA-H was started during the Biden administration, but I understand that the seeds might have started during the Trump administration. And just the way that it's structured, it's almost like an incubator. It's very entrepreneurial friendly. And even though ARPA-H is providing grants, it seems to fit into the ethos of this new administration, Trump 2.0. So I'm sure it will continue to flourish and we'll see the outcomes of that. They had awarded 13 grants to a variety of different projects focused on women's health. So it's going to be interesting to see how women's health takes center stage when it comes to biotech innovation. At the end of 2024, I had gone to an event where the program managers and the awardees of the ARPA-H grants came together and talked about their work. And it was mind-blowing, especially when it came to thinking about menopause, how that is a specific disease. It's not something that we should just say is a common experience, but let's figure out a way to heal the body and regulate it just as we do when it comes to our cholesterol or other things that might cause disorder. But we want to make sure that we live strong, healthy lives because we know that it's connected to so many different processes. So I'm really excited for how new types of funding will fuel biotech innovation, whether it's biopharma or it comes to creating new materials and ingredients, which we like to talk about here at Grow Everything.
Yes. There has been a flurry of activity at the end of the year when it came to the Department of Defense and ARPA granting money to build biomanufacturing facilities, and also DARPA giving out grants to small companies to see some really wild research being promoted. And I think that is also going to continue as this new administration comes in. A lot of that money is defense spending, but defense does drive a lot of innovation in the country. So I think that that's not going to stop. And especially, as you mentioned, Erum, a lot of it has to do with onshoring, bringing manufacturing back to the United States. And biomanufacturing is one of those things that brings that into the US a lot faster. It's advanced manufacturing, and we're seeing a lot of that work. What else do you have in your outlook for the year?
I'm excited to see how people are leveraging the convergence of different technologies, AI and drug discovery. I mean, we have to talk about it. We see a lot of companies in the space, and it's going to be excited to see who actually has great readouts and outcomes from their work, like who's actually making drugs that are very safe and effective. We had a great conversation with Nicholas Enziger of Italia in the last episode. If you have not listened to that one, I recommend listening to it. And that opened up a whole bunch of new ideas in healthcare specifically, and even new ways of testing drugs. I mean, it's very interesting. So I'm excited to see how those specific projects play out when it comes to new ways of developing drugs and therapies, and not just drugs and therapies for diseases and disorders, but also for longevity. How do we look at therapies that will help us live longer, healthier lives?
Yeah, I'm also excited to see more of the application of AI for either biological consortia, which is something that you've been talking a lot about over the past year, and also this idea of using multiple organisms as tools as opposed to just using one organism to produce a protein, but using multiple organisms to maybe build something. I'm excited to see how that's going to play out. I think I might be a little early on that kind of thing, but AI is going to enable that.
Hi, A quick shout out to our sponsor, Messaging Lab, the force multiplier for biotech. Your biotech company is making the world a better place. You know that, we know that. But does the world? There's a big reason why some biotech companies attract investors, sign up customers, and get attention. That reason is strategic communications. At Messaging Lab, we translate complex science and economics into compelling narratives. And we have done that for the most successful biotech companies across healthcare, agriculture, personal care and beauty, materials, and the list goes on. We're here to make sure your ideas not only get heard, but resonate with your audience. So if it's time to amplify your company's voice, visit messaginglab.com to explore how we can elevate your story and grow your business.
You have mentioned quantum biology, and I've been corrected several times in terms of not thinking that it was going to happen. It looks like it is going to happen a lot faster than I ever expected. One of the big outcomes from that is going to be this idea of creating digital models of biology, which we don't really have because biology is so complicated.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I heard of the concept was, again, during our conversation with Nicholas Enziger of Vitalia. They're actually having a summer class when Vitalia is happening, which is starting in a couple of weeks in January of 2025. They're actually teaching quantum biology among a variety of other classes that converge on very deep concepts. I'm curious to know what topics are discussed. What specifically are they going to talk about? Photosynthesis? Are they going to talk about new types of detectors or tools? I think it's really exciting. And this also comes at the heels of Google's Willow, the quantum computing chip. So now that you do actually have a tool to do some computation, what will we learn? It's very exciting.
Something else that I think we should mention is just waste as a resource. As we bring on more of these biomanufacturing facilities, they can't all be fed sugar or corn or waste from corn or soy. We're going to have to look for other things to feed them. And we've had people on the pod talking about that. There's a bunch of people that I'm very interested in having on the podcast that their whole specialty is waste as a resource, and being able to feed microbes things on site is fascinating to me. We did talk to Moji Karimi of Simvita, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of progress those guys make in 2025. This idea of using abandoned oil wells as bioreactors is fascinating to me. I just saw an article a couple of days ago about the number of wells that need to be capped, the amount of methane that is being released into the atmosphere, which is much more dangerous than CO2. And so all these methane producing oil wells are potential bioreactors or potential fuel for microbes that can be producing useful items for us. So that's something that I'm super excited about.
Yeah, I mean, there's a spectrum of waste.
Yes.
Right? There's clean waste, which is maybe waste from the production of juice. So you're just using one type of fruit and you're making the juice and you got the peels, and that's a waste stream. But then you have the New York City waste stream. And I heard that it all gets burned no matter what.
Geez.
So we've got to get our friend Ella King. I'm mentioning you again. When I saw her the last time, she was like, I remember when you mentioned me in this episode, in this episode. I'm like, okay, I'll mention you again. And we're going to have you on because she is a wealth of knowledge. And she took this class on learning how New York City handles their waste. So a lot of interesting information there. The variety of different waste produced, because we know our friends at Polybion, they were using different fruit waste to make a leather alternative. I know they're cringing by me saying that phrase. Anyone in the materials space, they cringe when you say leather alternative, because then you're already pigeonholing them to be a leather, when it's like, no, it's actually a new material, requires a new name, just like rayon, just like spandex, they all are new names. They're not leather alternatives or cotton alternatives.
Yeah, their new material is called Celium, and they've had a fantastic year this year. I think they are producing 1 million square feet in their facilities. They've been out and about. We've seen some of the products that have been made with their material from Gani, the Dutch fashion brand, produced a jacket, produced a handbag using the Celium material. So that's been very exciting to see. But I think another thing is microbes. We talked to Yuji of Biome. We've spoken to Ginger Dozier a couple of times. We also had Cultivarium on. So getting to know and examining the microbial world is very exciting. You have a very big interest in this, Erum. What's your outlook for 2025?
Yeah, I think people are going to get hip to the microbiome, especially the biomanufacturing world. When we had Dr. Elizabeth Henoff on the podcast, she was talking about how it can be challenging to bring microbes together to create an artificial microbiome. But there's ways. She didn't say it's impossible. She said it's challenging. And that's the perfect thing engineers and entrepreneurs want to hear. They like challenges. So I think people are going to start seeing like, hey, look, rather than maybe just using one bug, if we use multiple bugs, we might be able to reduce the amount of energy that's required to do this process. Or we might create a variety of different valuable products that we can filter out in different ways and use in different ways. I think the microbiome's very, very interesting. And it's so complex in terms of the uniqueness, depending on where you're looking, whether you're looking in your ear or the Galapagos Islands. I mean, there's so many microbiomes and they're all doing something depending on which environment they're in. So I think there's going to be an acceleration in that because, of course, this is the world we live in. Microbiomes were very challenging to understand because the tools weren't as accessible. They were either expensive to use that computation or it was just very challenging. But now it's much easier and more people have access to those tools. More people have the imagination, hopefully, by listening to our podcast. They know that, hey, look, you can make these things using biology. We don't necessarily need to let business as usual be. But also business as usual is taking a step up. And I'm talking about our friends in the world of CPG and the big consumer product brands. They're doing their part. We've been seeing this happening in 2024. We see that'll definitely continue in 2025. When I went to Pennsylvania for the holidays, I was watching some cable television and there were these commercials. I usually don't see commercials because I just stick with my streaming services that don't have commercials. But there was one that was a collaboration between the NFL and Head and Shoulders. And it was a football player that was basically microscopic, looking into the scalp to see other microbes. And they're talking about dandruff and how the scalp microbiome relates to it. They weren't talking about that too much. It was just very tongue in cheek, but I'll definitely put that in the show notes. I love the fact that they put the microbiome in a commercial with football players and Head and Shoulders. I mean, congratulations to P&G on that wonderful ad. It was amazing.
Yeah, and it reminds me, I know this is not necessarily a biology ad, but there was an ad in late October from Nike called Stairs, where it shows all these people hobbling up or down stairs or having a hard time sitting down and really making a tongue-in-cheek reference to people who had completed a marathon, I think the Chicago Marathon. And it doesn't really talk about the shoes. It's really more like, hey, you did it. You know that after you do a marathon, your body's going to be in an extreme amount of pain. We've talked a little bit about how we should do more science in these kinds of stories. And this is not a science ad, but I just thought it was something that was very different. And apparently it increased Nike sales by like 15%. So just even showing something that you wouldn't expect as you would like in a science ad is something that can be very effective to get people's attention. And it's an untapped area when it comes to pop advertising. We don't have enough biotech in the mainstream. Is something that we always say on this podcast. That's part of the reason why we do this. And we're starting to see some shoots growing from the seeds that are being planted, but I think we need a lot more of those. What else have you seen, Erum?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. When we see biology in television shows and movies, it helps us think about the reality of it. It makes it relevant, especially when there's a storyline that you can relate to. And there's an episode of American Dad.
You really have been watching TV, haven't you?
Yeah, there's an episode of American Dad that came on. Again, it was just in the background. But the father, Stan, discovered gene editing. And he was a scientist who was working on recreating a woolly mammoth. So hello, Colossal Biosciences. That's probably a nod to you. And then they talked about gene editing people. And American Dad is a bit of a spicy cartoon. I mean, just like Family Guy. And it's not necessarily for children to watch, but it gets pretty interesting when Stan, the father, gets a hold of gene editing technology. I'll leave at that. I'll put a link in the show notes. And then Adult Swim has a show called Common Side Effects. That is about big pharma and the government trying to conceal the fact that there is a drug that can cure all diseases, and they just don't want it to come to the market because that means they're all out of business. So it's very, very controversial, very Adult Swim, of course. But I just love the fact that these conversations are happening in a way that's just somewhat silly and it's thought-provoking at the same time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to common side effects because Mike Judge is a master of pointing a mirror at us and looking at technology. He did Beavis and Butthead, he did Idiocracy, he did Silicon Valley. So it's going to be a lot of fun to see what he does with this. And what I saw in the trailer was a mushroom. So perhaps the drug that cures all comes from a mushroom, which would not surprise me since mushrooms have all these wonderful properties that we are still discovering. So good on you, Mike Judge, and your team. Very excited.
Right.
All right.
Right.
So as we close out this very short outlook for 2025, I'm excited to start a new year. We've got a lot of great work in front of us. The podcast has some really great episodes coming up, and we've got a long list of really great people that we want to get on here. Is there anything else?
I'm excited for the shows that you mentioned. I'm also excited for a lot of events that will be unfolding throughout the year, and we'll be chatting about it here on the Grow Everything podcast.
Awesome. Well, let's end the pod there.
That's the pod.